Okay, and that says that I'm live, so welcome to Tokyo tonight. Hope you're all well. So as you can see, I've let me just put this on, boom. Ooh. I've got some new titles on here. Oh, start up the 10-minute sequence. We'll see how bad my lag is. Shouldn't be too bad. Let's make sure I can pause the video. How is everyone? Hope you're all well. This is a new title I've been playing with. I downloaded a bunch of fonts tonight, and so that is something I'm going to hopefully improve the thumbnails, make them a bit more readable. Hope everyone's good. Let me queue up the comments column. So good on you, Peter Subarashi. We've got the first comment from you tonight. I guess I'm going to take off. This is a bit obstructive, so boom, here I am. How's it going? So good to see everyone. A lot of comments in here already, which is always good to see. According to my video information, the health is good. There is actually a comment viewing thing built into the live product, into the live playroom. I just don't know if I can get it to work that well. We'll see. This might work better than with the real live comments, but I want to play around with that. It's been a busy week, news-wise. And I was planning to read up on the news and be all prepped and ready for this before I started, but as it turns out, I got stuck in playing with fonts. I love fonts. Fonts are like awesome. One minute, I'm just going to go close my door. Oh, sorry about that. So this is indeed the warming up phase. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did last week, which is I'm going to talk casually for about 10 minutes. I'm going to do two shows, which are going to be two 5-minute shows, which will be recorded shows. So I'm once again using my little timer app thing, which is awesome. I'm going to put that right there so that I stay on time. And then I'm going to get into the topics that you guys raised and get into things in a bit more detail. But that is the plan. We'll see how well it goes. So I guess let's go say hello to everyone who's in here and check out the comments. Which to do I need to adjust the zoom, which I just changed. So is that right? Let me just check how we're looking coming in. No, we're going to zoom in some more. Boom. Just give me a sec. That's about right. Okay. So let's check out the comments and say hello to everyone. So Peter Subarashi, first comment, good on you. Good to see you. Good to see you back. Hey, Raz Al Ghul. Good to see you always. Let the games begin. Darth JF, you're probably a bit early when you put this in, but I put this on an hour and a half ago to let people come and comment. But indeed, this is one of the big topics I want to talk about tonight. In fact, probably the main one, that North Korea have said for the second time, the other time was in 2008, that they would reinvestigate the case of abducted Japanese if they do that properly, and if Japan sees that they do it properly, that might result in Japan lifting some of the many sanctions that they have on North Korea. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that and why that would actually have meaning. I mean, people don't perhaps realize how close North Korea and Japan actually are, and that the sanctions that Japan has on North Korea actually do have a big impact. So we will come back to that one. Got some good comments here from Peter Subarashi, and she said that men were much ruder in the 60s. Well, I wasn't here in the 60s, but by all accounts that's pretty consistent. Yeah, that the society was a little bit rougher back then. Austin Richardson, there's some good questions here about Korea, so I think I'm going to come back to those. But good to see Austin Richardson. And yeah, talking about Korea, which is always an interesting topic. Bobby Tripper, B-Boy Tripper, you are not spam. I don't know what is happening with that sort of show. Can I explain the difference between the verb temo tara, for example? Okay, that's a grammar question. I may come back to that. That's a bit of a language lesson one, but okay, good to see you anyway. I will come back to all that good stuff. Hey, Nihon Senshi, good to see you. Oh, and very welcome. First time watching from the beginning, good to see. Kantensai, konbanwa, good to see you. Oh, everyone likes seeing Kantensai, popular member of the audience. Emily Louise Maitland, always good to see you. Alex Stratus, good to see you, mate. So now the crowd is coming in renting, so the regular crowd is definitely there. Some good questions as always from from Alex Stratus. Indeed, I see that Kantensai is asking for my view on Hato Poppo. Hatoyama, former Japanese Prime Minister, who basically was forced to resign for over-promising and hugely disappointing Okinawa, wants to run for Okinawa governor. For what purpose, I cannot understand. Another big bit of news this week. So there's some very cool stuff happening in the news and whatnot. It's good to see that you're all here, and everyone come say hello. I've got 5 more minutes according to that, where I'm going to come and warm up and say hello to everyone. What's been going on with me? I've been very busy this week. I've probably not been as prominent online as usual, just because I've had a lot going on. The weather is crazy. We've got a mini heat wave at the moment. Like, it's not supposed to get this hot. Like, they're predicting 33 in Tokyo tomorrow. I don't do Fahrenheit, but Celsius, most of the people in the world who watch this will get that. 33 is very hot. It's like midsummer temperature, and you know the definition of midsummer temperature is getting worse and worse each year. Partly because of global warming, but global warming is only meant, even in the worst case, to account for 0.1 or 0.2 or whatever degrees. But Tokyo's got this crazy, what they call a heat island effect, which is just as it gets bigger and more concrete and it reflects more heat, it means at night the city doesn't cool down, so the next day the heat just gets worse and worse and worse each day. And it means now, like last year, we had a whole month of like 38 degrees, which is like, I don't know, but it's above 100 every day. I mean, it's hotter here than it was, for example, down in Singapore, where I spent last July, which is on the equator. So, you know, that said, Tokyo still has one of the best climates in Japan. I mean, certainly, you take in Yamanashi, nearby Tokyo, there's a city called Kofu, which like 3 months ago was buried under like 10 meters of snow. It was snowed in, and they had so much snow, and it was so cold there that they had to send in the military to rescue people and send food. And today it was like 36 degrees there. And that's only a couple of hours from Tokyo. But typically, of course, Kyushu and Osaka, they're much hotter. The climate there is much harsher, which is tough. So, you know, it's the summers here suck, the winters here suck, the spring, if you've got allergies and so on, they suck, and the weather is kind of unstable. Autumn is the only really good time of year in Japan, and Japanese talk about how much they love the 4 seasons. There's 5 seasons, there's five. They've got rainy season, which is nothing like spring and nothing like summer. But yes, they're 4 seasons and they're wonderful. Today I went to Korakuen, which was good fun. I took the son to play in the playground area there. I was going to take him for some cycling lessons, but it was just too hot. I'm going to have to start playing some specials. I don't know, I always start thinking in my head the song Too Hot by the Specials whenever it gets too hot. And we're already there, which is pretty depressing. What else is going on? Not a lot. Just like I said, I've had my head down at work. It's been kind of crazy. But other than that, I don't know. Fantastic show on Wednesday, of course, with Shoot Tokyo, Dave Powell, and really enjoyed it. We went a bit longer than usual, but we went a bit longer than usual because it was worthwhile. We were looking at photos and hearing the stories behind them and talking photography with Dave Powell. You know, YouTubers love cameras, and I don't know, I think we had a really, really good show with him, had a really good chat, and so it is worth watching. Yeah, of course the Kickstarter was a huge success, and we will be going through the comments from the last show, of course, and you can still go and contribute to that. We'll ask Dave Powell for the best 4, and they can be the best comments. They can be a joke, they can be insightful, they can be a good question, anything you like, and we'll pick out the best questions and they will get the best will get a book, and the next 3 will get T-shirts from Shoot Tokyo. And Victor's going to probably arrange the sending of that. So it's nice to have a contest every now and then, something fun. But yeah, so anyway, I'm going to go in and do my 2 5-minute slots of news, and then we're going to get into then we're going to get into the regular show, talking with each other. So get ready for it. So I guess about now. Okay, this is how I record my videos normally. I always have a bit of a nervous intro, an awkward intro. I do awkward intros and awkward outros. I edit most of the awkwardness, but this is live, so what can you do? Boom. Oh, I have to move where I sit because I've changed where I've got the magazine now, so I have to sit here. And boom. Okay, so let me make sure I'm properly lit and sit on this side. And okay, with no further ado, hi, I'm Hikosaemon, and this is Tokyo Tonight, recorded on June the 1st, 2014. I'll be showing this every Monday, I guess, going forward. I'll be editing it from the video once it's rendered properly on YouTube. This is me just going through the most interesting topics and news of the week, and just a quick roundup. And if you want to watch and engage with me on the show, you can basically join me on Sunday nights at 11 PM, and we can talk about these topics in detail. I take all the comments on the show live, and we talk back and forth, but these are the topics that I want to be talking about today, so let's go through them and have a look. One thing I noticed actually this evening is that Gaijin Pot, very, very nice of them, they went and did an article that the 20 best podcasts about Japan, and within that they've got a few ones that you might know: Just Japan, Busan Kevin's podcast, Tokyo Podcast, of course, by the same guy who makes the G-Pod podcast from Gaijin Pop, which is of course also one of the best podcasts. Anthony Joe, who we've had on the show, and he's a good guy. However, they've also got at the bottom, of course, 2.5 Oyajis, our Wednesday show, which is doing fantastic. So very, very nice of them, and that's well worth checking out. Best podcasts. I noticed that earlier this week, down the bottom here, Tamogami, he recently ran for Tokyo Governor, ex-self-defense force guy. He's going to form a new political party with Shintaro Ishihara, which is going to be split out from the current Isshin no Kai, the Japan Restoration Party. I personally I'm kind of a fan of Taichi Sakaya, who's like the ideological founder of Isshin no Kai, and I found Hashimoto kind of interesting. I thought it was a huge mistake joining up with Ishihara. And I'm kind of glad that Ishihara is going back. And before this, Ishihara, through his mate Hiranuma, they had a kind of a far-right conservative party called the Sunrise Party. It always polled below the margin of error. Nobody liked it, had no friends, and it looks like now they're going to reform that with Ishihara in it, and Tamogami's going to go and join it. So they've got a bit more star power than before. But I'm kind of glad that they're out of the JRP, you know, just for the whole opposition reorganizing itself, and the Democrats are looking to join up as well. So yeah, some interesting times in terms of opposition politics, and indeed the right wing as well. So that's an interesting thing to catch up on. That one's in Japanese, but there's some interesting political news that has happened this week. A great piece by Jake Adelstein, or Adelstein I should say, on the Daily Beast, talking about Japan's 99% conviction rate and the justice system here. Abandon hope all ye tried in Japan, which is still very much the case. That's a good bit of reading, and indeed just never mess with the police in Japan is the moral of that story. There's an interesting article from Rocket News that I picked up this week about a Brazilian exchange student in Korea who got plastic surgery to make himself look more Korean. Yeah, well, that's interesting. I tell you what, you could have just applied for an extended visa. I don't know, that seems a little bit... And the thing is, you can still get deported looking like that. What do you do? That's some dedication to the country that he's chosen. Some great tips actually in an article here on how to learn a language, like 5 tips. And it's funny, although the thing is in Japanese, the summary, the original sources in English, and the summary, 5 actions, 5 principles of learning a language. And I think some of the points on this, like learn information that helps survival, has relevance and so on. So principle 1, focus on language content that's relevant. Principle 2, use your new language as a tool to communicate from day 1. I think these are all really, really good points which I agree with. Principle 3, when you understand the message, you will unconsciously acquire the language. That's very true. So physiological training, talking about the muscle. Oh, physiological training is the 4th one. I think he's misnumbered his slides there. And principle 5 is physiological state matters, which indeed it does. So really interesting article there. It's in Japanese, but there are links to the original English, and this stuff is always very cool for those people interested in learning languages. Running out of time here, but the other things, of course, there's been an increase in recorded bullying in the workplace recently, which is another big trend. A great article in The Economist, in the Banyan column about Japan's demographic issues and how it's already starting to show signs of changing society. Some featuring, that thing is still there, of Abe and the new push to basically of the new negotiations between North Korea and Japan, which is a topic I'm going to talk about at length after this, in order to get Japan's abducted citizens back, which is great news. And the other thing I feel is really, really awesome is the new Dragon V2, the SpaceX rocket, which can actually land like a helicopter. Lots of cool things, the Google self-driving car, lots of cool tech news this week. So lots of topics to talk about, and I'm going to be talking about these in more detail. But a great week in tech. Great to hear about the progress between North Korea and Japan, and some really interesting stuff going on in Japan at the moment. So if you want to see all the details, you can watch the full show that is pre-recorded, and you can watch it live on Sundays at 11 p.m. Otherwise, I'll see you later. Peace. And that was about 6 minutes, so that was too long, but we'll see if I can make the Japanese version shorter than that. I'm sorry to be doing this, ignoring all of you, but I'm going to come back to you in like 4 or 5 minutes. I'm going to try to do the Japanese one shorter. I guess a lot of this is in English, so I'll try to make that more relevant. Let's see how the commenters are doing on this. Oh, that's right. So I guess I can do that, and I can make that a blank shot so I can come back and see the comments. By the way, am I synced up? How is everything looking at the moment? Return to newest comments. So yeah, keep loading in your new comments if you've got them. Hopefully, I'll bet you this looks like it's frozen, and I bet you it's going to suddenly like load up a lot in a minute. But anyway, I'm going to psych myself up into Japanese, so bear with me. By the way, I have been playing around. I was given access to a new subtitling feature, and it's pretty good for a web-based one, for a non-software-based one. It's the best one I've seen. There's a few little bugs with it I've given feedback on. But I used it to subtitle the last show, and I want to go back to this, so I will be subtitling the Japanese, although you can tell what it is because it's the same as what I just said. But anyway, so back to it. Boom. Let me come back to the big title stuff. And in Japanese now. Okay. 3, 2. はい、こんばんは、Hikosaemonです。今日またちょっと早く今週6月1日までの週のニュースのまとめをしたいと思うんで、はい、一緒に楽しみどうぞ。はい、こんばんは。このショーはもちろん毎週水曜日の夜11時からライブ配信してるんですけど、主には英語でやってるんだけど、日本語でももちろん日本語のコメントあったら日本語で回答しますんで、ぜひこのトピックス一緒に長く話したかったら1時間程度一緒に話す、もうこの内容を深く話すようにしてるんだけど、とりあえず今週の僕は面白いと思った内容を紹介したいと思う。で、これは何なのかというと、もう今週見つけた面白い、主には英語だけど日本語でもある記事とか、日本絡みとかテック絡みとかいろいろ好きなトピックスで、今週何が面白かったかと、ちょっと自分の関心のところから紹介したいと思って、で詳しくはいつも後でライブで話してるんで、興味があったらフルの1時間の東京トナイトという番組を確認して、そしてぜひライブ一緒に参加しましょう。紹介したいところはですね、まずはですね、外人ポッドという大きな、英語情報の日本に関連するサイトがなんか日本の最も面白いポッドキャストとかビデオポッドキャストも含めて日本在住 YouTuber ブーさんケイブンもそうだし、うちの2.5 Oyajisの書も紹介されて、 まあちょっと嬉しい話で、自分のこの番組じゃなくて Two and a Half Oyajis だったんだけど紹介されて、まあやっぱ最近評価されてるんですよ。多分 Two and a Half Oyajis は英語なんだけども、多分ね英語でライブ配信のもう最も日本に関する見られてるビデオ番組今なってるんじゃないかと思うんだけどね。次面白いと思ったニュースはもちろんその維新の会がもう分裂することになって、石原と橋本が。でこれそもそもね僕はまあ維新の会相当落ちてきてるんだけど、でもまあ自分個人的にはそもそも日本来る前時代からでも栄太一の本を読んで、もう彼の考え方とかいろいろ僕はすごい説得力あると思って。でその酒屋さんがその維新の会を橋本さんと一緒に作った時に、いやこれ面白いなって自分でも思ったんだけど、でも戦略的に石原と組んだことが僕はちょっと失敗かなと思って、もうこのような結末になるかと思ったんだよね。でなんか多様の党だっけ、もともとなんか石原平野党があったんだけど、今度その石原がこの玉上さんと一緒にもう新しい党を作るけど、おそらくそれと同じような党を作ると思うんだけど、まあある意味で維新の会のなんか立て直しの機会かもしれないんだけど、ちょっとまあ大きな世の中特に野党の中の再編が今行われている途中で、まあ、みんなの党ももう何になったのかよくわかんないんだけど、それと今民主党とまあ、残っている維新の会のところ、まあ、もしかしたらなんか新しい何かなるかもしれないけど、ただ前の民主党みたいなことになったらそれもなんかね情けないし、もう本当ちゃんとしたしっかりした野党の選択肢が欲しいんだよね。まあ自分投票権ないんだけどね、でもあるとしたらやっぱちょっと面白い。日本一般にはそういうのが欲しい。あとなんかJ. ギャロスタインというまあ、かなりプロファイルの高い外国人記者に最近日本のなんだっけ刑事裁判のなんていう有罪と判決の割合 99% ぐらいっていうことについてなんか詳しく日本の刑事法制度についての長い記事が英語だってとてもまあ興味深いですね。多分日本人にも興味深いと思うんだけど、あと今週すごい面白かったと思ったのはこれなんか韓国に住んでるブラジル人のもうかっこいいんじゃないかとは思うんだけど、この男は韓国人みたいにもうなりたくて整形通じてこうやって顔変えて韓国人みたいな顔にしたけど変えなきゃよかったと思うんだけどね、そのことするのかな。ペルー人昔なんかね目というかなんか日本人風に直した整形が一時期流行ったのあったんだけどね、ちょっとまあ興味深いと思って、あとこれはとても面白かった。なんだっけ、才能も留学も不要、なんか外国語を勉強する、まあ、5つの原則で、これもともと英語の内容なんだけど、僕は全くこの内容5つの内容があって、僕は基本的にとても同感してる。自分がなんか日本語を勉強した観点からは全てこのリンクはこの動画の下にあるフリップボードというなんかニュースを集めた雑誌の中にあるんだけど、これとてもなんか英語を上達したい人におすすめの情報です。僕全くはい僕も同感だと思ってます。あとちょっと面白いと思ったのはやっぱパワハラとかで多分ね増えてるんじゃなくて報告の数が増えてるかと思うんだけど、あと日本人は減ってることと、で今日主の多分喋るトピックスはもうライブで喋るトピックスなんだけど、まあ、日本が北朝鮮と交渉再開したことを経てやっぱり拉致被害者の取り戻し今回本当実現できるんじゃないかって、これももう大変まあやっぱ相手はあんまり信用できないんだけど、でも何か小泉が得られたような成果ができたらもうそれは大変いい結果になると思うんだけど、あとちょっと変なこのビッテが作ったね、サムネイルがあったんだけど、そうじゃなくて最近ロケットとか新しい運転手のいない車とかちょっといろいろ面白い技術もあって、これについても話したいと思うんだけど、興味がある人ってぜひ日曜日の11時夜ジョインして一緒に話してもいいし、興味があったらビデオの下でもコメントください。これもこのまま毎週月曜日に公開しますんで、はい、これからもよろしくお願いします。はい、peace. And that is the end of that, and we can now jump to comments. I guess we can come back to that's right, gotta get rid of it that way. Boom. We can come back to talking about any of these articles that interested people. But I guess first thing is I want to see where we are at with comments. I guess I'm going to start taking comments based on the order that they popped up in the video. So now we're in the free talk section. I do want to talk about North Korea. In fact, let's talk about North Korea a little bit, shall we? So I remember when I first came to Japan, and whenever there was a big push during the Clinton administration to try to bring North Korea in from the cold, and there was a lot of optimism around North Korea. There was with Kim Dae-jung as president of South Korea, it looked like with Kim Il-sung recently deceased and the new son as president, I think there was a feeling that there was a real chance to have both, to have some sort of a reunification or some sort of a real change in North Korea. And at that time there was a lot of money being offered. I think Clinton was permitting them to use a nuclear power plant. People gave them a lot of aid and so on. And in the middle of this big kind of festival around, oh, let's all be nice to North Korea, Japan was kind of holding out and was saying, well, no, we're not going to pay any money because we think you've abducted some of our citizens. And there was some proof around it, but there was also a lot of debate, even within Japan, because traditionally, certainly even after I came to Japan, after the year 2000, the far left parties, particularly the Socialist Party, but also the Communist Party, but mostly the Socialist Party, was actually politically aligned with the North Korea Workers' Party, and so they really didn't tolerate any kind of negative press, or they would argue back that any criticism of North Korea was kind of a right-wing plot. And indeed, there were people even within the LDP itself. Nonaka, there was the Secretary General of the LDP, who was very pro-North Korea. You know, and people, various rumors around why, you know, they suggested he might have been taking, you know, political funds from North Korean citizens, which is of course illegal, but there were some suggestions about that. I don't know what the story with that is, but certainly he was very pro-North Korean, so it was a very sensitive topic, and it was kind of more of an urban kind of a myth that there was some disappeared Japanese who had showed up in Korea. And even when you talked about this on the English, on the English language, the foreigner sites, there was a very interesting kind of a thing where a lot of, well, it certainly is true that most of the foreigners in Japan, particularly on news sites, tend to be more of the liberal aspect, and they tend to favor more the socialist and the communist parties in Japan, which in turn tend to be a bit nicer to foreigners and have a more shared view of history with what we have, including being sympathetic towards Korean minorities and the kind of a view of history that Japan needs to reflect more. So I always found the stories about the abductions before they were confirmed as having happened as being very compelling, and I remember having some debates with people who, you know, even foreigners who were adamant that it was all kind of just a right-wing, you know, plot made up to discredit North Korea because they're socialist. And indeed, I think this is what, and with many of the arguments back, which came both from the Socialist Party and from the many Koreans themselves in Japan, was that why would they need to abduct Japanese to train them as spies when they have 350,000 North Korean citizens in Japan, educated in North Korean government, funded and run schools under North Korean curriculum, who pay taxes to North Korea from Japan? Why would they need to kidnap Japanese to train their spies? They've got people here who would, you know, the North Koreans themselves said, we'd happily train their spies, teach them how to be more Japanese. You know, so it didn't make any logical sense. If North Korea trusted their own citizens in Japan, there would never be a need to kidnap people. And indeed, there were actually there was one family which got a letter from from a daughter and two sons, who it sounds like were probably Red Army, or they were far left activists and may have voluntarily originally gone to North Korea, but apparently they smuggled out a letter after being there for some time, which made it back to their parents in Japan, which said that they're being held there. And they wanted the family to help notify the authorities about it, and they went to the Socialist Party, which was headed by Takako Doi, which was at that time Japan, the sister political party in Japan of the North Korean Workers' Party, and the number 2 party in government, or the second most popular political party in Japan. So this is just one thing to appreciate. North Korea, not only is there a lot of sympathy, but actually the socialists have always been very powerful in Japan. And they were directly affiliated with the North Korean Workers' Party for a long time. When Naoto Kan, the Prime Minister during the nuclear accident, when he got into politics, he joined the Socialist Party at the time that it was the affiliated North Korean Workers' Party sister party. So just to appreciate this, and also bear in mind as well, North Korea isn't a detached, distant world like it is for most of the rest of the world from Japan. There are a lot of North Koreans who live in Japan. It's a very large community. I think 350,000 citizens currently in Japan, but there's probably about at least that number or more who have naturalized or don't acknowledge North Korean citizenship, but that were of North Korean descent or had family there or whatever after the war. So there's a very, very large community here, and they do play a significant part, and they do stand out within Japanese society. So it was a huge shock when I think North Korea saw the opportunity to, so let's come back on this. So first of all, the fact that Japan was not cooperating, and the fact that Japan was kind of holding firm on the abductee issue and was the only one standing out as not quite buying into everything. I remember got a lot of criticism from people saying, this is like watching the Iron Curtain come down, and the people who don't jump in are going to miss out or whatever. And people saying, well, the nuclear issue is more important, and Japan doesn't have its priorities right, prioritizing these imagined abducted people and so on. For North Korea, the big carrot always is that in 1965, when Japan established diplomatic relations with South Korea, they paid a huge compensation package. I think it was equivalent at the time to like 15% of Japan's GDP they paid basically in colonial reparations, which was a mutual adding up. It was a setting off between the benefit that South Korea got from infrastructure that was built by Japan against the cost, and and it was intended and signed in secret. The South Korean regime, which was ran at the time by the current president's father, never actually announced publicly. They kept the details of the deal secret. But it was basically a settling of war reparations claims, which is why today Japan claims that the comfort women and so on, it can't acknowledge those claims because it'll open up the whole thing again, that anyone can, they can double dip, they can get reparations again, when Japan paid this huge payment back in 1965 to settle all reparations with the Korean government at that time, which some Koreans say wasn't valid because it was a dictatorship. But what is Japan supposed to do about that? So North Korea saw a chance if it establishes diplomatic relations with Japan, with whom it already has a very large economic relationship. If it could somehow get these colonial reparations, it would be worth a few abductees. So Kim Jong-il basically, Koizumi, well, there were a lot of secret meetings leading up to this, but it all led up to Koizumi, who was the most long-lasting and popular prime minister in Japan for a long time, flew over to North Korea, met with Kim Jong-il, and he came back with a bunch of released abductees, as well as some what really looked like very flimsy improvised documentation, supposedly proving that other requested abductees were dead. The thing why it's flimsy, and I remember at the time a lot of time was spent looking at this in the Japanese media. Death certificates were provided for the I forget 8 or so that they said that they didn't produce. They all died at different times in different accidents in different parts of the country over a timeline that was given. However, they were all typed on the same typewriter. They were all stamped with the same stamp. I mean, it looked like somebody had literally just run across town and made these death certificates up. And they didn't do a very good job of it. I guess when you're in North Korea and you're the government, you're not used to needing to prove to create convincing evidence for other people. You can just pretty much do what you like. And this kind of increased some of the it meant that nobody believed that North Korea had come clean. And although Japan, and also not only that, but when Japan, when they released some abductees, they kept the families back in North Korea, and they kind of demanded that Japan return the abductees back to North Korea very soon afterwards. And this is one thing that they do. They kept the families, the children back in North Korea as a way of controlling them when they went out, and have them not say that they helped train spies and sort of stuff like that. When Japan didn't allow the abductees to return, North Korea accused Japan of abducting their abductees. And eventually, after a lot of fuss, they managed to get some of the families back with their children and out, but then everything kind of fell apart. North Korea never got a deal, or Japan ended up increasing sanctions on North Korea. And to this day, the two sides have not picked up on it until now. However, now Japan has increased sanctions over the years, and Japan is one of the main legal destinations of things like Korean truffles and mushrooms and stuff like that, as well as shellfish and so on. If you have like a shellfish in miso soup in Japan, at least until like 5 or 6 years ago, most of that came from North Korea. But they shut all that down, and a big ship called the Manyongbong, I've probably mispronounced that, but I think that's the name of the ship, which is like a huge commuter ferry, which also ferries goods and so on, and it's kind of a lifeline for North Korea and for currency, which gets remitted back to North Korea. And Japan banned that ship from docking in Japanese ports, and they basically cut off North Korea from Japan and from the North Korean community in Japan. They banned remittances, wiring of funds. Apparently, this whole thing had such a huge detrimental effect on the North Korean community in Japan. This received only a little bit of press, but some things like, for example, there was a huge rate of people of North Korean ancestry who just naturalized after this. They got so fed up. Well, they felt betrayed by North Korea lying to them that the abduction thing was not real, and they kind of stood up for North Korea all these years, which they felt loyal to. And it turned out not only had it lied to them, but it kind of proved that it didn't trust their own citizens in Japan. Another thing was that although North Korea doesn't have diplomatic relations with Japan, it had a de facto embassy called the Chosen Soren, which existed in, well, still kind of exists. It's actually in the Chiyoda district in central Tokyo, a huge building, as befitting the country with, I think, the third highest number of foreign residents in Japan. So a big embassy, and it serves that whole North Korean community in Japan. And it was a de facto embassy, but not an official one. Because Japan had, well, Tokyo in particular had a number of socialist governors, and remember the Socialist Party was affiliated with the North Korea Worker Party, so they kind of treated it as an embassy even though it wasn't officially, and they did not charge it things like land taxes and so on, or property taxes for this huge building that they had. However, after this went out, and this was just around the time before, I think, Ishihara became Tokyo governor, but on top of this, everyone felt a bit disgusted that they had kind of let the Chosen Soren get away. And there was a presumption that the Chosen Soren must have facilitated the spies that had come into Japan and kidnapped the Japanese citizens. So they basically said, they got out a calculator and they figured out what the back taxes on that building were, which came to millions and millions of dollars, and they couldn't pay. And not only could they not pay, but all the members of Chosen Soren were so disgusted at what had happened with the abduction thing that a lot of them stopped paying tithes. You know, they kind of paid de facto taxes to it. And as a result, they kind of went bankrupt and they lost their building. And the Japanese government's been trying to auction off the de facto North Korean embassy now for, I think, 2 years. And it's kind of been sabotaged every time we've tried to go ahead with it. And this was raised in the recent negotiations that happened in Sweden, was that they said, we'll open up an investigation again into the abduction issue if you let us keep our embassy, let us keep the building. The Japanese government has said they won't do anything about the building. That's a private matter. It's being handled as a civil law matter, not as a political matter. But they've made some other deals that they will ease up on sanctions that are currently in place if North Korea actually takes concrete steps to execute a new investigation of missing Japanese people, including apparently it's a broader investigation as well. It relates to all Japanese citizens in North Korea, which includes abductees, the spouses of, well, not only spouses but also many ideological Japanese after World War II, and particularly after the establishment of North Korea, travelled to North Korea to help build the socialist paradise that, of course, North Korea has become. They travelled over there. Unfortunately for the very ideological, and indeed they actually moved there with their families to support the North Korean government and to try to make socialism successful there. Within 10 years or so, a lot of those people found themselves in concentration camps, and some of them have managed to escape, but they're not very well liked in Japan because they were far leftists to begin with. But there are a lot of those people who have gone missing and have had a very hard time. There are the Japanese wives of North Koreans who went back, who also sounds like were rounded up during some of the purges as foreigners and have had a very hard time, and there's no real proper accounting of all the Japanese wives that travelled over to North Korea with repatriated North Korean husbands. There's also people who were left behind at the end of World War II, or the end of dead bodies of Japanese people who used to live in North Korea when it was a colony of Japan. So there's a lot of stuff to sort out there. And basically North Korea's promised a full investigation into all of that, and they'll take concrete steps on that. And Japan has said if they prove that they're taking concrete steps, then they will start easing back sanctions, including allowing this big ship to come back and forth, and to allow imports from North Korea again, which are a huge lifeline for the economy there, which is really getting squeezed right now, not just from America and South Korea, but also from China, which is getting kind of annoyed with the way that North Korea's been behaving lately. So, you know, South Korea is apparently upset that Japan's, and indeed, I mean, America as well is kind of upset that Japan's gone off and has cut a deal, or seems to be cutting a deal with North Korea. There again, I would say, why wouldn't, I mean, geez, this is to save the lives of your own citizens, which are held basically hostage of sorts. I mean, they're not hostages because North Korea hasn't tried to return them. In fact, they've tried not to, but that's effectively what they are. This is like the Iranian embassy crisis, if you ask me. I mean, any country, if it was America, they would be dropping in commandos over this. You know, Japan's been very patient with this, and they've waited a long time, to the extent that, you know, some of the people there are going to be dead of old age before this comes out, possibly. The big payoff for North Korea is, of course, that they're going to get money which will help sustain the regime. And as abhorrent as it seems to me to sustain that regime, at the same time, there's no question that that's what South Korea is trying to do. And, you know, they've set up these industrial parks in Kaesong and these resorts and whatever. All the money there is to prop up the horrible regime there. And, you know, in South Korea, which has hundreds of abductees in North Korea, doesn't do a thing for those families. In fact, you know, it suppresses the criticism of those families of the government. So, you know, and which leads to a result that North Korea is actually treating the Japanese abductees like VIPs compared to the Korean ones, which again upset the South Koreans. You know, their government's made to look bad because they brush the issue under the rug, and Japan won't, and Japan's right not to brush it under the rug. I think it proves that Japan's strategy on North Korea has been correct. You know, to be harsh on them. Not hold out carrots, and to demand that they show action before they get reward. And, you know, America's been burned, South Korea's been burned, China's been burned. And Japan seems to know what they're dealing with them. And, you know, frankly, which it is, they're kind of, the government there is, they use tactics a lot like what mafia in Japan use. You know, they act nice one minute, then they use extreme threats and violence the next, and they take advantage of the position that they have, that they are not restrained in the way that Japan is by needing to abide by international laws or customs. They can act as crazy as they like and use that to their advantage. So yeah, it's been really interesting. It's interesting that it's opened up with Abe. Bear in mind, this could be a false start. Korea made a similar promise it was going to investigate the fate of the abductees back in 2008, which it broke. It just fell apart. I think there's a better chance this time because they seem to respect there being a good, powerful, popular, stable leader in Japan, which there hasn't been since Koizumi. And indeed that could be part of the reason why things moved when Koizumi was in power. You know, if Abe stays in power for a long time, as it looks like he can, he'll have the ability to make good on the promises that are being made right now. You know, I think it was because Fukuda resigned was their excuse for not carrying through last time. But yeah, you know, you can't rely on Japanese prime ministers staying on power for a long time to do a deal. So anyway, it's great news if it results in more people being released. And I've got little doubt myself that there are definitely Japanese people there, and that regime is not going to collapse because China and South Korea don't want it to. So yeah, you got to deal with them, and you got to get your people out. And I hope this results in some progress, particularly on Megumi Yokota, who you know, was presumed, if it was true, she must be dead, and you know, and if it wasn't true, it's a lie, whatever. That for all these years, it'd be really good to see this kind of wrapped up. And you know what, I would actually like to see, I'd love for North Korea to have an embassy in Japan. There are a lot of North Koreans here, and they are regular people, and you can meet them. You'd be surprised. You may have run into them without even realizing, because they're everywhere. And they're regular people. You know, they're people just like us, and to be stigmatized because of a very bad government that they had. I've got a huge sympathy for the North Korean people, and you know, if Japan and North Korea can have a more normal relationship and not be enemies, I think that's great. But you know, it has to be on the basis of them coming clean with Japan on all the stuff which they're still doing right now, and I hope that happens. So that is the North Korean thing. That is the big news this week. So let's go through the comments. which I've left sitting here for a long time. So indeed, Darth JF, that's the topic of the night, and that's what I've just been talking about, and that is true. Back in the 60s, men were much ruder back then. It's an interesting thing. It was a very different society back then. It was a very young society. I mean, old families in the post-war period and in that baby boom period would have like 10 kids, whereas now Japanese barely even have 1 kid per family. And by all accounts, you know, there was higher crime. It was a poor, you know, poorer, economically more backward. Kids nowadays in Japan, they're fewer, they're spoiled. From what I hear, and it's interesting, I mean, Japan's gone through such a dramatic transformation over the last 50 years, but that seems to be consistent with that. If you look at movies or culture in Japan from the 60s, it was a very, very different time, and that seems to be consistent with that. Austin Richardson, apparently a government survey in South Korea found that 60% of South Koreans view North Korea as a cooperative partner. Am I just Western propaganda biased into finding that absolutely loony? Well, bear in mind that Koreans are educated also to have great faith in their racial pride, and that gives them an instinctual feeling of wanting to be friends with North Korea and trusting them in spite of all the stuff that goes wrong. And this is borne out by the tourist resort and the industrial park and so on, that they're always still trying to do joint things together, and people do want to be reunited, I think, in South Korea. General people do. I think the government is a little bit, they understand what a big challenge it would be actually doing it. And I see the article cites mutual distrust of Japan as a factor, and I suppose they're all Korean ultimately, but it's the most wild card country in the area, and they still exchange fire. Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, China and South Korea join in common as well, and you know, South Korea is probably very put out by hearing that Japan was in talks with North Korea, and apparently they immediately went and had a big history get-together, a meeting with the Chinese government in Harbin, which is former Manchuria, which is an area where I forget the name of the guy who did it, but the first Japanese prime minister, the first parliamentary prime minister of Japan, was assassinated by a Korean assassin in Manchuria prior to the colonial period in Korea. But he was, I think he was like a consul general of Korea at the time that he was assassinated. According to Japanese historians, and this is the whole thing, Koreans say that this was the guy who advocated making, you know, colonizing Korea and taking over Korea, and it was a great, you know, patriotic, heroic act of rebellion, assassinating this guy. To Japan, this was the first prime minister of Japan, and well, yes, he was consul general to Korea, but Japanese historians say that he was actually in the factions that were against colonizing Korea. He was actually against it. But this Korean guy took advantage of, while he was visiting a train station in China, to shoot him, and he's a huge hero in South Korea. They actually recently named a warship after this guy, and China built a museum dedicated to the guy who assassinated Japan's first prime minister. And you know, Suga said, the Japanese cabinet secretary said he was a bit put out by it, but it was, you know, building on this, they just had a recent, at the same time when they heard that Japan was talking to North Korea, South Korea had another meeting with China and said, we're going to cooperate on more anti-Japanese history. Like, that's going to be really helpful. And indeed, that is what they share in common with North Korea, is that they all found a big part of their national identities on bashing Japan. Granted, with some good reason, but going a little bit crazy with it. So, yeah, they have that in common, and that's kind of sad, but yes, and that is indeed... And who knows, I mean, again, a lot of South Koreans are educated to be so hostile towards Japan now, even though many elderly Koreans are not actually that hostile. Some are, of course. But it leaves you thinking, you know, does Japan have to consider whether a united Korea would be a real actual threat, whether it might be more of a threat than China, and for what reason? I mean, that's the thing, it doesn't make any sense. They should just be friends, if you ask me, but, you know, people are silly like that. Trying to get in the center of the camera, which is here. I found it again. Anyway, let's skip ahead because I only have 10 more minutes and I want to get through all the comments. So, Darth JF, I think that's probably true. It's probably an aspirational result. I think that's possibly true. But, yeah, it's definitely government to government. And I don't know, I guess also people in South Korea are probably desensitized to all the craziness from the government there. And I'm pretty sure that they do differentiate that. You know, the government from the people. So I think it's still good, but I think it's also based a lot on the racial education that they get, believing that, you know, Koreans have to stick together, which is well, again, it's another building block. That and hating Japan are two building blocks for a united Korea. Don't know if either of those are actually things that you should do, you know, building on racial pride and hatred of another country. I'm not sure those are good building blocks for another country, but that's what they are. Boy tripping. So the question, so 明日のテスト落ちても大丈夫、落ちたら大丈夫。So you're asking the difference between temo and tara in that situation. Temo means even if. So 明日のテスト落ちても even if I fail the test tomorrow, I'll be fine. Whereas 落ちたら just means if, when, or it means like it's a conditional situation. It basically can be used to mean when, like when I fail the test tomorrow, or if I fail the test tomorrow, I'll be okay. But even temo adds a bit more emphasis. It adds the even concept to it. So even if I fail tomorrow, 明日落ちても大丈夫。落ちたら大丈夫 is just saying, you know, if that should happen, if it should happen, that I should fail, I'll be okay. But the other one's saying more, it's more emphatic, saying even if. So it's the difference of even. The thing is, yeah, typically in that kind of situation, I don't think you'd usually say when I fail tomorrow. And the point is, you're saying the even concept, even in English you'd say it that way. If I fail the test tomorrow, I'll be fine. You'd more often say, even if I fail tomorrow, I'll be okay. Even in English, it's the same way that you'd use it more often. You can say it either way. They're both valid sentences, but I hope that helps. Anyways, the temo is even if, whereas tara is just if. And that's why. So yes, there's some help there, and I hope that's all helpful. Good to see you, Nihon Senshi. Good to see you joining, and very glad to have you coming for the first time. That's right, I just fixed the this is gonna update like crazy, or there are no comments, in which case no one's been watching, and that's gonna be disturbing too. So yes, Hatoyama running for governor of Okinawa. That is crazy. He had to resign because he promised to get all the American bases out of Okinawa, and when Hillary Clinton beat him up over that and forced him to change his mind on that, Okinawa was so angry at him he had to quit. And the thing is, Abe is actually doing better with Okinawa than Hatoyama, even though you know, Hatoyama tried too hard. He loved Okinawa too much, but as a result he raised the expectations and dropped, you know, and lost everything. And there it goes. I know it's going to go so before this goes up. As an expat immigrant, do you have some advice during based on your perspective about the concept of home? This is a great question. Alex Stratus. I've lived in Japan longer, 15 years now. I've lived in New Zealand for 13 years, and in that time in New Zealand, 13 years, I lived in about 13 houses or so, more than 10. Whereas I've lived in about 5 houses in my 15 years in Japan. I've been much more settled in Japan, although still not settled. I've lived in Australia for a total of, I make out, about 8 years, I think, or 9 years or something. I've lived in Singapore. So for me, it is, it depends. I mean, if you've got a stable family home, it's always logical to call the family home home. And again, this is where my situation's a bit unique, that my parents have both moved. I stayed in New Zealand and both my parents moved away, so I don't have a home in my home country. I consider both my parents' homes to be my family home. My mother's one has been there for a long time, even though I've never lived there before. So it's kind of funny. I've got a stable home that I've never lived in. My father's got a couple of, he's moved around a lot, but wherever he is I consider home, but it's always changing. So for all of that, you know, I find Japan to be totally natural to call home, and maybe more so than most people. But yeah, at the same time, Japanese, they do ask you, when are you going home? And I have to explain, I've got no home in New Zealand, you know, so it is, I consider this home, and I consider this where I come back to, but you've got to explain it. I think it's natural. When Japanese ask you about home, some people get offended. They say, I live here, and this is my home. Or, you know, why are you excluding me again? And you can take it that way, but I think what they mean, and Japanese have a very strong sense of home being furusato. I think that's what they mean when they say home most of the time. This concept of furusato, you know, the home in the old-fashioned sense of, you know, the place where you were born and raised. And typically as well, Japanese really have a thing against moving. Like, you know, even if the dad gets assigned to some other part of the country or overseas for work, you know, the family will stay, often with the extended family, just to let just to keep the kids' situation stable and to look after the parents and so on. So they've got a very strong sense of you know, and also the family land wherever it exists. They've got a very strong attachment to that within Japanese culture. Maybe I think in New Zealand we have a weaker sense. Maori, it strikes me as being similar to Maori, where Maori feel very tied to the land that they're from. But yeah, where it is in Japan. So when they talk about this, I think they're referring mainly to that. And here it goes. Comments updating now. Way too late. But I'll scramble through the last 5 minutes to make up all these comments, which are now just randomly updating. Probably a lot of them 50 minutes late. But so yeah, I think you have to take into account when the way the Japanese ask you about home, that they're thinking of furusato, and their own furusato might be where they grew up as a kid or whatever a lot of the time, and they're thinking about that. And so even if you don't live at home with your parents anymore, that's probably they'll ask, well, when are you going back to the home where your parents are? And here come all the comments. Look at this, it's crazy. YouTube, fix this. I'm trying to have the comments on here so I can be more interactive, but there it goes. Anyway, I'll try to catch up with it. But so for me, I don't know. I take that into account, and I explain that I don't have a furusato. I really don't have a furusato. I have parents' homes which I visit occasionally, but my only real home is in Japan, and that's. But I explain that out, and I don't get offended. I get more offended when foreigners ask it, but even then, I can still explain. I've lived here a long time, and this really is where I am now. So anyway, now there's like a bazillion comments that have come through, so let's go through it really fast. Let's do the super fast final 5-minute rush, and then I'm going to sign out. So, wow. I can't even see the top anymore. Okay, so this is for the recorded part. Indeed, Peter Subashi, my heart beats also during that time period. Late, Mr. Life, you good to have you here. It's okay if you come fight. Daniel B should have my avatar in front. I don't know what that means. Desert Raven gave a good time. Good to see you joining us for the first time live. Thank you for doing that. Joe Casey, good to see you. Unusual Bob 5. It's the only requirement for residency 5 years. No, it's more complicated than that. That's a whole different show. But you can be married for 5 years, or single for 10 years, or a special case, and they allow some special cases. Or indeed, like if you're a Japanese, got a Japanese parent but you live abroad, there are cases where they'll waive the whole process. So yeah, it's 5 if you're married, 10 if not. And it's not automatic. They still will reject a lot of people who apply. Cosplay. Oh yeah, I took a photo today. No cosplay beyond this point. I was at Tokyo Dome City, and there was some sort of cosplaying convention, but in all the areas around the cosplaying area, there are these signs saying no one in cosplay beyond these points, which I thought was kind of funny. I thought, oh, you know, you're in Japan when there are signs up saying no cosplay beyond this point. But some people were commenting, actually, some real cosplayers were commenting, yeah, actually in Japan this is why cosplaying sucks, because, you know, you just go to McDonald's in your costume. In America, in Japan, they'll kick you out. Like, they really actually discriminate against cosplayers in spite of Japan being the home of cosplay. So that's kind of interesting. I didn't know that. It's kind of tough to be a cosplayer in Japan. Saluki-san, good morning to you. The Blue Ninja X, good to have you a part of us again, indeed. Renton, that's right, it's not the military, it is the self-defense forces, and banned by the Constitution, that was written in crayon by American students under a deadline. Tsuyu, the 5th season, that's right. Ramso Gaijin, konbanwa to you. Koi Sloan, good morning to you. Kantensai, kyou wa hontou ni atsukatta ne. Yeah, exactly. Yashichuka, all that stuff. Hot food now. Darth Jeff, you're flying to Beijing tomorrow. Yeah, it's going to be hot in Beijing as well. I mean, yeah, everywhere is getting hotter. And the air pollution as well, indeed, Renton. Evening, Rob Japan. Good to see you, man. Saluki-san, Busan Kevin, that's right. He's taken down a bunch of his videos on his channel. Don't unsubscribe. Subscribe. It'll come back. And he's got his Jayland Kev channel still going, but his podcast is still going also. But his main channel is going to be down for a while. Just a hiatus. And some people are explaining that at the moment. So indeed, Ramso Gaijin, could I Yes, I'm sorry, I was having trouble staying on center because I've moved all the things around, and I'm sorry about that. I'm still getting used to the new setup, but I'm still going to stick to an hour, and I've got 30 more seconds. Renton, yeah, it's kind of a bilingual show. I'm going to record the little 5-minute Japanese show and cut it out and post it later, so that's right. Which people are explaining because they get it. Laugh, 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 laugh. Saluki-san, I agree. That wasn't a winning combination, that surgery idea. Ahmed, good to see you as always. Raz, good to see you. NeoBear 66, finally caught the famous me. Jackpot, well, I'm glad you see it that way. Good to see you as well, sir, or madam. Although Bear, I'd say it's probably a sir. The North Korea stuff, Mini UN, indeed the abduction stuff all sucks, all that stuff. NeoBear, good to see all of you guys. I've got to come through to the end and wrap up. Oh, Snowden, of course. Wondering when the second Snowden will come out of North Korea. Well, that's where he could have run away to. He's probably lucky he didn't, I guess. Norei in Japan, that's right. Good to see you, and I think I've got to wrap up now. So I'm sorry, I don't know why the comments suck so bad. Not that your comments suck so bad, the commenting system sucks so bad. I'm going to talk with YouTube about that, but as always, great seeing all of you guys and good talking to you. Hope you enjoyed the show. I've got to go. I've got to wake up early tomorrow morning. I've still got to do some stuff tonight. But, and Alex Travis, both your parents were immigrants too and still are. Well, that's interesting. Now I'm an immigrant, which is kind of fun. I mean, my grandparents were immigrants. So, yeah, both my parents are from different countries. So, that's a good question. It was a good question. And no, I will not move to Senkaku Island, but I think that's where they should put all of Fukushima radioactive stuff from. That is the end of the show. Good to see you all. It's late. We'll always try to improve this, but I hope you enjoy it. Leave your comments if you like it. Please like it. Do that stuff. Subscribe if you like all this stuff. It helps. It helps me know. Still leave comments after this if you like, and check out the shortened shows, which are going to go up tomorrow, which I'm going to cut out. But yeah, otherwise, see you on 2.5 Oyajis this week, where we may have an interesting guest. I'll have to take some cafe drinks for that one if we get the guy that I'm thinking of. No, we won't get him this week though, so we don't know who we've got this week, but it's always fun. And of course every Sunday 11 PM Tokyo Tonight with me, Hikosaemon. Come and join, all good, and I will see you all later, so have a good night. See ya, peace. Will it turn off first time? Boom.